Hey, it's us. We're here. I've been gone way longer than I ever anticipated, but that's how life works sometimes. I am joined as a way of making up with Nathan Hoffman, of course, our good friend Nathan. What's the name of your YouTube channel again? Nathan. Oh, Nathan, can you hear me?
Nathan H83. Sorry, I got a lot of. I can hear two of you. I don't. Why am I hearing two of you?
Oh, do you have a YouTube page open?
Yeah, I must. Is this it? No, the volume's turned down on that.
Well, yeah.
Here we go.
Okay, there we go. We got it fixed. Wonders of modern technology. So we're here. We're doing a hangout as an apology for me being gone way longer than anticipated. Just life does that sometimes. And unfortunately, the way the summer is looking, there will be numerous times when I will be gone, either to conferences or researching stuff like that. Yeah. So to make up for it, I thought Nathan and I would hang out for a couple hours, and we're just going to talk. We're going to chat. All questions, no limitations of the questions, as long as they're reasonable. But yeah, all conversations are good to go here, man. We're just here. We're here for the chit chat and talking about stuff. Anything new on your channel?
On my channel?
Yes, sir.
Just a little video footage of riding my bike around through the St. Patrick's Day parade. Nothing too exciting, really. I did make a video about a week or two ago showing, this. It was about the Apocrypha, about
right.
Somebody made a claim about the Apocrypha, and then I just opened it up and showed, no, that's not true.
Yeah. It's amazing how often that happens. Like the bill down in Florida that everyone's been, they're like, it says don't say gay, and they'll even put the text on the screen and highlight it, and then they misrepresent it, and it's on the screen. And you're like,
yeah,
seriously? What's going on here?
Just like Donald Trump is a racist, even though he said a million times that he's not.
Yeah. Oh, it's there's an old saying, you cannot awaken one who pretends to sleep.
Yeah, there's another saying, you can guide a horse to water, but a pencil has to be lead. Okay, Titan asked a question. Nathan, have you had any new revelations about the Apocrypha lately? New revelations. I don't know.
New insights? Anything
new?
Yeah.
New revelations. Oh, yeah. I just learned something today. And you ever heard of Eupolemus? You ever heard of that guy?
No, I can't say that I have. I may have run across him, but I'm terrible with names.
I'm sure you've seen these documentaries. The Patterns of Evidence team. I don't remember which documentary it was in. I think it was in the one about whether Moses could have written the Bible. Anyway, they quote Eupolemus. He's a Jewish historian from before the time of Christ. Okay. And I just learned that he's mentioned in First Maccabees. He's actually mentioned there. Yeah, Judas Maccabees sent him to Rome about 158 BC or whatever. Anyway, what's cool about that is that Eupolemus is a Jewish historian before the time of Christ, and he confirms the chronology in the Greek Septuagint.
Oh, does he now?
Yeah, because he says from the time of Adam up until the time of Ptolemy Demetrius, probably some Greek king over Egypt.
Yeah.
He said there was about 5,000 years or whatever. Well, 5,000 years from then, that's 7,000 years for us, which confirms the chronology in the Greek Septuagint. And this, he has to be a real guy. First Maccabees is real history. Eupolemus was a real the patterns of evidence team is not going to quote a historian who doesn't exist. And so, I just learned about this guy, Eupolemus, and he's a Jew from before. Josephus is after Christ, but Eupolemus is before Christ.
Yes,
and he confirms that chronology that's in the Greek Septuagint that Kent Hovind just simply will not be convinced of.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of those things where, so Bat Mom, I see your question. We'll do that the next one because those are interesting points. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people they get, so what happens, and this happens on a lot of topics, right? They're caught up and they put their faith in one, like a translation, right, of this and this one understanding without and saying, okay, well, here's all my ideas around it. Because I know a lot of people, they are tied up in the idea that history has to be a total of 7,000 years, 6,000 years of human rule, with the seventh being Christ. I would tend to agree with it, but I can also see how that's maybe more of a, I mean, you could make the argument that's poetic, right? That these are poetic, a poetic series of 6,000 years. Or you could argue that maybe that 6,000 is actually counting from the destruction of the Nephilim, or from before the Nephilim came. Like, there's ways you could have conversations about this and say, look, we have to change our ideas based off of what the scripture actually says, and we need to be open to saying, look, there are these things, these questions in scripture that we need to be open to, right? And say, hey, let's explore this. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they won't, because it calls into question things. And I'm certainly not saying this of Mr. Hovind, is that unfortunately, people have made money off of things. They've put their, they have ideas in some of these, sort of caught up in these things, and being able to say, you know what, maybe I was wrong there, and I need to change. That's very, very difficult for people to do.
It's difficult to ever say I was wrong.
It is. Yeah. And that's, and particularly when people, because here's the problem. And I think this is one of those things that is, anyone who stands up and says, okay, let me talk about this, we have to be willing to do, is say, hey, I was wrong. Or guess what? There's new information. And we need to, and maybe I needed to change, or I needed to change my perspective on this. I needed to learn more. Yeah. Or this was the best I could do with the information I have. We now have better information. Let's learn that.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, but like the chronology in the Hebrew Masoretic text doesn't fit with the narrative of the Bible, because I think I might have said this on your channel before, but basically it says that Abraham died old and full of years at 175 years of age. Well, according to the Masoretic chronology, his great-great-great-great-grandpa, Heber, is still chugging away at over 460.
Yeah.
How's Abraham old and full of years at 175 when there's a 460-year-old living around the corner? That doesn't work. But in the Septuagint, Heber died hundreds of years before Abraham, because of the difference in the years and the ages. If you've seen my video, you've seen the differences in the chronologies.
Oh yeah, no, and that's one of the things that actually I really liked about that video, when you're showing the differences in the chronology, is how like you said, the lifespans start making more sense, because it's like everyone gets off the ark, and it would make sense for the group early, the closer you get to the flood, for them to live longer. Like that makes perfect sense. And so so the idea that their lives would get shorter also makes sense. But the way, if you use the Masoretic text, it's like, it's so fast that you still, like you said, you still have Heber kicking around while, when Abraham dies. You still have Shem, which is where the theory that Shem is Melchizedek comes from. It's like, well, Shem's still alive while Abraham is hanging out. So it's like that chronology shifts that, and you're like, okay, so we start seeing people die slow, their ages start getting shorter and shorter and shorter, but we do see the previous generations dying off at a reasonable time. So yeah, it absolutely Like I said, that's one of the things that really made me go, huh, that's a really great point. But again, it's not even just the internal, it's not always the internal consistencies, or as long as it's not. I don't like it because it matches what my idea would be. I like it because there's better archaeological evidence for it being the original text, right?
Yeah, and it fits with the story of the Bible, with the narrative of the Bible. I mean, I was just rereading the article that Robert Carter had written recently. No, he didn't write it recently. He wrote it a couple years ago, and he wrote it in response to my video about the pyramids and the flood. And I was just rereading his article, and he basically said, "Well, in 8 people coming off Noah's Ark in 100 years, you can get hundreds of people." I'm like, really? You think the Tower of Babel was built by hundreds of people?
Yeah.
It was built by thousands, if not millions of people.
Right. Well, and that's one of those things where, again, you get when you give that extra 700 years, like that's, people do not understand how profound that length of time is, like how much can happen, how many people can be born, and really that the limitations on things are more due to population size than knowledge. Like when you're looking at the ancient world, it's more about population size. I mean, yeah, technology to a point, but it's always more about population size. And if you can produce that many people, and the Fertile Crescent was a great place for that to happen, then yeah, absolutely. Real quick, there was a great comment about the point we made about people not being willing to say, hey, look, maybe I got this wrong based on the information. We have new information. Let's move forward with this. Is that there can, you cannot complete forgiveness if you do not admit that you were wrong. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point. I mean, it's, if you never admit that you're wrong, you can't, it's hard for people to forgive. And again, I can forgive someone who hasn't asked for forgiveness, but I also recognize the fact that they haven't recognized that they were wrong, that they haven't asked for forgiveness, is a deal breaker in the relationship. Because while I have forgiven the wrong maybe done against me, or the fact that they may have made a mistake or whatever, the fact that they're holding on to, that they haven't said, hey, I need to change my mind on this, is a relationship breaker, because it's saying there's nothing more you could do. It's like, you're not willing to change. It's like,
yeah. And that's the thing, is people wanted me to respond to Kent Hovind because I uploaded his response, and they're like, oh, Nathan, you should respond to him. I'm like, I have nothing to say in response because he's already made up his mind.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence, can you help me out? No, it's just like, I already made up my mind. Don't even dare try to convince me.
Yeah. Well, it's why I have made the decision a long time ago never to do debates. Like I do this. I would rather bring somebody on, and I mean there's topics that you and I would disagree on, and it's like, but it's like, I don't want to do a debate with you. I'd rather have you on to have a conversation.
It's more like, let's discuss our disagreement, and maybe you'll convince me, maybe I'll convince you, but it's not like a debate. It's just, let's just talk about it.
Yeah,
it's like a discussion. Whereas some people, they want to get into these debates, they want to get all.
Well, with debating, we don't even have debates anymore. What we have are people making presentations so that they can put a gotcha moment on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. It's like everyone wants the Ben Shapiro thug life thing that they can post up there.
That's not what I want. What I want is just to be like, hey, well, here's what I'm thinking, and here's the evidence backing up what I'm thinking. If you think I'm wrong, well, then tell me. Maybe I am wrong about something. Correct me. And iron sharpens iron, but not like the way some people want to debate.
Yeah. Well, it's not exactly. It's like you and I. We want to know when we're wrong. I've changed my mind on a lot of things because. That's how you explore it, and that's how these things works.
There's a guy at my workplace who corrects people when they're wrong, and people don't like it. Like, how dare you? Because sometimes what he does is he'll tell them that they're wrong, and then he'll, how you send an email to somebody, but then you can CC it to somebody. He'll CC the supervisor and the other supervisor above him.
Yeah.
and he's pointing out somebody else's mistake, and so they don't like it when he does it. But a lot of times when he's correcting me when I'm wrong about something, because a lot of what we do is detective work kind of stuff. I'm glad that he corrects me. I don't want to do the process the wrong way. I want somebody to correct me on being, most people don't like that, but I want someone to. I mean, it's kind of annoying. Like, okay, yeah, I screwed up.
Yeah.
But it's nice that somebody is at least bold enough to tell me that I did something wrong, so that I can make sure not to do it wrong again. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like him. I got no problem with him because I want someone to show me, what I did wrong so that I can do it right the next time,
Oh, exactly. Well, and you don't grow if there's no, as humans, we can't grow until we're told, hey, this is a mistake. And here's the thing. And I know I'm about to shock everyone in the world with this particular with this particular little truth bomb I'm about to drop. You can actually have a conversation with someone, learn, understand their point of view and where they're coming from, and still disagree. That's okay too.
Right. Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's so I don't want to pick on Ken Hovind because to I don't know how to necessarily pronounce that name. Quasi's comment that he,
what is that?
It's like, yeah, he's not the worst. Trust me,
Ken Hovind is not the worst. I love his seminar, and that's something I just posted on my YouTube channel just recently. It's like, these people are bashing Ken Hovind on the comment section of my videos, and I'm like, no, don't bash him. He's on the right side. I just have a minor disagreement with him about the exact date of the flood. I don't think it was 4,400 years ago. I think the flood was 5,000 years ago. But he's still on the right side of the debate, that he still argues the creation in the Bible viewpoint and disproves evolution and disproves atheism and all that kind of stuff. And I'm on his side for the vast majority of everything.
Well, and here's the thing: like I could, if your argument is, you said it's the flood was 4,400 years ago, the flood was 5,000 years ago. If your argument was the flood was 15,000 years ago, right? If you argue that it's old Earth creation, there's lots of ways you can argue some of this stuff, right? That is still internally consistent with the scripture, that is still open to, it's like, these are valid ways to look at that. And by the way, if you're having the conversation, we're all at the same table, in the same restaurant, eating the same food. The guy who's over there saying the universe blew up 14 billion years ago on a Tuesday in October, and that magically everything comes together perfectly for life to exist, that dude's in a different restaurant in another country, eating something else entirely,
on a different planet in a different galaxy.
Yeah, exactly.
He's in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah. So the problem, so the tax fraud thing. Well, the problem with the tax fraud thing wasn't on him; it's with the government. They didn't recognize him. Now, again, that tells me he needs a better accountant. That, again, this is why there is a reason why I will not ever be a 501c3. I will never I am not tax deductible. I will never be tax deductible. That's one of the reasons. And the other one is I don't believe anyone should get to tell me what to say or do. Ever. That's the Holy Spirit's job.
Yeah, and why do people always bring that up? Oh, he went to jail for tax fraud. What does that have to do with the Bible or the debate between creation versus evolution? Oh, well, he went to prison for tax fraud. That proves that evolution is true.
Yeah.
What?
And his tax fraud wasn't that he was, and the issue wasn't that he was defrauding anyone. It was that his paperwork was wrong. He had the argument that again, it's a fight he lost in court, but there are lots of people having this fight and are still having this fight.
Again, some people have actually been able to prove in court that the law doesn't exist, because they've proven in court that the definition of income is corporate gains. So for example, let's say I have my own guitar, handmade guitar company, and say I buy $1,000 worth of guitar components, the strings and the pickup and all that stuff, and the block of wood to create it. And say it costs me $1,000 to create that guitar, and then I sell it for, say, $2,500. Well, then my profit would be $1,500, not the full $2,500, the 15. And so my corporation or my company's profit would be $1,500 off of that guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, when you're paying somebody a wage, you're compensating them for their time. By definition, that's not income.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so some people have actually been able to prove that in court and get away with it.
Oh yeah.
Not that they're getting away with anything; they're just standing on their rights.
Right. Well, then this is the other problem with the whole thing. It's like, for every, everyone who likes to, again, they'll point out the whole Ken Hovind thing. It's like, well, great. Can we find any other case where something similar happened and the person was never prosecuted?
Yeah.
They got a minor fine, or everything's just left alone. I bet you we can find that a heck of a lot more often.
And not only that, but okay, so like this one person says, well, it has to do with him being dishonest. Okay. Okay, think about this for a second. Him being dishonest. If Kent Hovind knew that he was going to go to jail for 9 years, do you think he would have knowingly done something that would put him in jail for 9 years? No, he would pay it. He genuinely thought he was doing the right thing. He genuinely got bad advice from his tax advisor, and he went to jail for it. His wife went to jail for a year. His wife wasn't guilty of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing. You can't blame him for being dishonest. He didn't know.
Yeah, there's there's a difference between being dishonest and making a mistake. That now, again, that's the problem is here's the problem. We have to realize there are people who have committed far worse crimes who have not gone to jail, right? I mean, and they've done similar things. That's the whole point, is there's a difference between making a mistake and actually committing. And again, the problem is you can make a mistake and still go to jail for it. That's why I do what, again, my private life, where I'm actually paying the bills, like that is, there are things I have to do in order to avoid going to jail because I am licensed by the state to do certain things.
Yeah.
So it's like we have, and I'm telling you, I have seen it where people have made honest mistakes and they will go to jail. I have seen people make honest mistakes and somehow the government's like, you know what, that's fine. There are plenty of politicians who've made very public and very obvious crimes. I mean, these are not mistakes; they're crimes. They don't ever get hauled off to prison. So let's just keep in mind with Ken Hovind. Look, did he make a tax mistake? Yes. Did he pay for it? He did. He's
not going to purposely put himself in prison. He's not going to do that.
And then just ask the question: why would the government go after him and not 1,000 other people I can name off the top of my head?
Yeah.
Like the government's not going after a lot of people, and they like to pick and choose for this reason. But the broader question here is not even like let's take Ken Hovind out of it. This is a broader problem that you can find across the board with a bunch of different people in creationism, where unfortunately they're not willing to have some of the conversations that we have here. That's why this channel exists. I want to know, hey, is there a reason why we should look at the Masoretic text and say maybe it's not the best text? Maybe we do need to look at the Septuagint. Is that a better text? What's the evidence for it? What's the evidence against it? Yeah. And then how does the physical evidence comport with what we find in the text? That's the entire point of the channel, is to have these conversations. Unfortunately, you can't have them with a lot of people. You can't have them with a lot of these groups because pride. Sometimes they don't want to feel like they're going to lose face, right? And that is a greater problem. But that's an American problem. Like, I'm sorry. This is something my father-in-law said maybe 2 years ago. I've mentioned it lots of times on this channel. The problem with the American church is that it's American. America does not value wisdom anymore. Never has. It does not value humility. It does not value saying, look, I would rather be in the right versus I want to be right. Those are two different stances.
Yeah.
And the problem is in America, it's more profitable to be wrong and stand your ground than to be willing to introduce new information and say, I'm going to change my mind. And so the problem is that bleeds into the church, because the church is no longer leading the culture. The church is being led by the culture. And again, church meaning church cultural system, not the much, much smaller group of truly redeemed remnant Christians.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing about getting back to what, people do with debates, a lot of times people talk about, who won the debate. Oh, did he win the debate or did he win the debate? Who won the debate? And it's like, what does that even mean to win a debate? What, I mean, can you imagine if you lost a debate, but you're still right?
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
It's like, oh, well, he did a better job at convincing the audience, but is he still wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole purpose here is to seek the truth. And I don't really care about beating people over the head and winning debates or whatever.
Well, and again, everyone wants that. They want that Ben Shapiro thug life moment because it plays well on YouTube and they can monetize that.
It's kind of like when I'm at work and I'm going to say that this, this part is bad and it has to be reworked or whatever. It's not up to the correct engineering specification. And somebody comes along and says, no, you're wrong. It has the right specification. It has the zinc coating it's supposed to have. Then I'm just going to be like, well, I'm going to do what I believe to be right. And if somebody higher up says that I'm wrong, then that's fine. But it's like when you've literally studied the blueprint and you've studied, coatings and volatile corrosion inhibitors, and you've studied all that stuff. And you're completely convinced in your mind that what you're doing is the right thing, then you do what you're right. And this person over here who wants to argue with you, I don't need to argue with them. I mean, maybe they are right. Maybe I'm seeing something wrong, but I mean, you got to convince me. And if I don't see the evidence, I got to do what I believe to be the right thing to do. I'm putting my name on that, And yeah.
So to Quasi's last point, that's basically everyone at this point. That's the problem. He's not unique in that. In fact, I would argue half the arguments made, not even half, I would argue the vast majority of arguments made by most creationists, and I am a young Earth creationist. I'm straight up.
Me too.
We're both young Earth creationists.
We're both on Kent Hovind's side when it comes to young Earth creationism versus old Earth creationism, evolution.
Yeah, I'm in the process. Like, we finally got all the materials. I'm just working on the final details. I've made the creation evidence in a box. Like, we're going to sell it at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose. It had I don't think you understand. I'm very much the young Earth creationist here. The problem is and I'll tell you, most creationist arguments are terrible because they don't. They aren't the problem. So here's the real problem on that aspect. I want to get to the question Batmom asked earlier. The real issue there is that so many so many people who are doing the whole creationist thing, they are very much science. A lot of them are science people, right? That's what they are. They are science people.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily know how to debate things or create the best argument. Like, they'll do something that sounds, maybe even from an academic perspective, that sounds right. The problem is they don't know how to persuade. It's like, okay, maybe you're close to the right argument, but you have to understand how people think.
Well, see,
you have to make a different argument for that.
That's why Kent Hovind is so good at what he does, because he was a high school teacher. He knows how kids think. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of people in the world who they don't have a college degree. A lot of people just have a high school diploma. And so, Kent knows how to speak to people and explain things in a way that really helps you to pick it up and understand it. Like, oh, I get that. Whereas sometimes these PhD guys, everything they say is like they're writing, their dissertation for their PhD, and you're like, what did you just say? It's hard to understand.
Yeah. So I want to answer Batmom's question real quick. I went ahead and pulled up the verse here, and then we can come back. So there's an interesting point I want to make on that. idea. So her question was actually from her daughter, right? Is Revelation 8:1, right? It talks about how when the Lamb opens the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for half an hour, right? Like, what's going on there? What's the half hour? I'm going to be honest. Again, like I've said many times throughout the entire book of when we did our study on the book of Revelation, I don't know. Like, does that have significance? Is that what is the meaning behind it? There are lots of people who have made arguments for it. For but the problem is the usually on most things there's a reason you can say, okay, here's why this matters, right? And this is, and you can, and most people's reactions or interpretations fall within that spectrum because there's evidence for it. The problem is when in the book of Revelation you get such wild interpretations, is because there sometimes isn't any evidence as to what's happening there or what may be the importance. But it's like, so to Quasi's point, it's everyone's praying in silence. Well, it doesn't even say that there's praying. It just says that there was silence. That's all that the text gives us. Any interpretation beyond that is it's just that it's our reading into the text, and there isn't necessarily something from the Old Testament that would tell us what this is going on. And here's the worst part: what if it's just that that's just it? Like it isn't an allusion to something. It's just everyone was silent in awe for 30 minutes, right? But the problem is, for me saying that's me interpreting, like that's there's nothing for me to base it on except for my reading of it. So all I can say is, and all I feel ever comfortable saying is, what does the text lead us to conclude? All I can say is there was silence for 30 minutes. Was it because everyone was just in awe of everything that occurred? Was it because everyone was praying? Was it because there was we don't know. The text doesn't actually give us that answer. And sometimes we just have to say, I don't know. It just says that this is what occurred. For example, what are the seven thunders, right?
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, he wasn't allowed to share that.
Yeah.
I want to know. I want to know what the seven thunders said.
Oh, and I think the reason we're not told what the seven thunders are is that we would actually, I think it's a dead giveaway as to what would be going on. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that's like, that's withheld from us. It wasn't withheld from John, but it was withheld from us.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of those times. Okay, Back to the Future, right? It's like if you do things, you interrupt the timeline. I think sometimes certain prophecies hold certain things back so as not to interfere with the way they play out. Yeah. Like it's to give us enough so we'll understand where we are and when we are, but not in what's happening, but not enough that it actually tips off Satan as to what's going to happen, so that he doesn't interfere.
Otherwise, Satan is going to know who won all of the sports games for the next century.
For the next century, then he's going to make exactly.
He's going to make millions of dollars
gambling.
Like death.
Yeah. Yep, precisely.
Back to the future.
But she also asked if any of the trumpets had sounded from Revelation. Again, my position on that is I will not say, I won't. I can't say with ontological certitude that they have, but I think there is a solid argument for several of them being blown. And the reason for this, let me go ahead and pull up the trumpets real quick.
While you're pulling that up, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have the ability to put people's comments on the screen here? Can you just show me an example of that? Like throw Batman's comment up there. Wait, that's Bat Mom. Hey, Bat
Mom. Yeah.
Or just and I'm just kind of curious. Okay, so you can do that. I was just curious if you could do that or not.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Easy peasy.
Because that's kind of cool. Because like if we're gonna respond to people, it'd be kind of cool to like throw it up there and then be like, hey, let's talk about this.
Yep. Nope. That's absolutely something we can do. So Quasi, so what you're working from is the I always get them mixed up whether it's the amillennial or the preterist view. I think it's the preterist view that revelations occurred in 90 and 70 AD. You're 99.99% preterist. I like that. I'm not a preterist. I'm premillennial. I think it's.
I'm sorry. What is preterist? What is that?
It's the view that the Book of Revelations was basically summed up in the first by the beginning of the second century. that it's not.
Everything in it already happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the basic view, and so I'm pre-wrath. I'm a pre-millennial, but pre-wrath. So again, just because it's my reading of the text. I think it's the simplest reading of the text. And I think it's easier to argue for that, particularly from the book of Daniel. We did that thing on Siru Papers, right? The prophecies of Daniel, that it makes more sense for that to be modern day. So, but to the question about the trumpets, right?
Okay, while you're thinking about the trumpets.
Yeah, go for it.
Somebody commented on my channel the other day. I uploaded video footage of this parade, the St. Patrick's Day parade. And the first comment I get is something about like March 30th, some seal is going to be broken. You know how in Revelation there's the seven seals. And they said this particular seal, I think the seventh seal or whatever, is going to be broken on March 30th. And I'm like, okay. And so I just responded and said, that's interesting because I just broke a seal on my blender today or yesterday. And wow, there's something to that.
Did you hear which seal it was? I'm trying to figure.
I can go back to my YouTube channel and find out
what
in the world they were talking about.
So
I had this. I was making a smoothie with this blender, and somehow the seal came off, and the blender blended the seal, and I'm like trying to pull pieces of seal out of my smoothie.
That's probably not. That probably would have been a not tasty thing.
Well, yeah, it's not tasty, but I think it's prophetic that the seals are going to be broken.
Yep, there you go.
It's getting my mind on the breaking of the seals.
Yeah, that was the 12th seal, the smoothie seal.
I don't know, but I should have counted how many pieces it broke into.
Yeah,
I think it was 7 pieces.
Yeah. So okay. So to answer Bat Mom's question. So again, there's the preterist view that all this stuff happened back in the day, right? And I just disagree with that. Largely because the sky did not split open, Jesus did not show up, and the preterists basically say, and a lot of other arguments would go, well, all this stuff happened. It's about the Romans, and that Jesus comes at the end, right? I would disagree. I think there's again, I think the statue of Daniel makes that impossible. So does the Daniel 7 prophecy of the beasts. The nations are all modern nations that come at the time of the Antichrist. So they all exist. It's England, Russia. It's Putin's Russia, which is rising right now, and then we will eventually have the reformation of the Alexandrian Empire, right? Which is basically the Ottoman Caliphate.
By the way, is anybody rooting for Putin?
That entirely that's a question that entirely depends on Hunter's piggy bank.
Yeah, we're all on Ukraine's side because we're told we have to be. I don't know much about it. I'm just saying it's kind of funny. You have to be on Ukraine's side. Okay, sure. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I think we can argue. Well, obviously, the people who are going through this, that is, it's terrible. Our sympathies are obviously with the people of Ukraine, and this is clearly an illegal invasion. My problem is,
I just don't know enough about it.
Stuff like this happens all the time. Are we preoccupied because this is Hunter's piggy bank? And there's other reasons to be really concerned about the actions. One of my big concerns is did the same elites who are freaking out over this, did they not set this whole thing up to occur this way? Because I think you can make an argument that our foreign policy has literally led to this. And it was obvious that's what was happening. So
there was that whole thing with Hunter Biden, and he got a bunch of money illegally from Ukraine, and now
Ukraine and Russia. That's why I'm very doubtful about why our response has been the way it is. Because the problem is, I can honestly say, look, I sympathize with the people of Ukraine. It is a war. War is hell.
Yeah,
people are suffering and dying. That is absolutely horrible, and our sympathies are with them. And we should do something to end this war. Yes, all agreed. My problem is same people who are saying that we have to do XYZ are the same people who created the problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem. It's like, if you failed, everything you've done for the last 40 years has been one big colossal screw up and created nothing but pain and suffering. Maybe we should stop trusting you to solve this problem, particularly if it looks like this may be you've got a financial interest in this. But back to the question about the trumpets, right? From a premillennialist view, there are most who would follow the Tim LaHaye version would say, no, the trumpets haven't sounded yet. But there is an argument, and like I said, I'm not going to say that I 100 percent back this argument up with ontological certitude. Only I think it's a decent argument. The first trumpet, right, is Revelation 8:7 says, the first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. One argument is that this is World War One, and because a third of the nations on the planet were engaged in this war. The ammunition used at the time was ball ammunition, so literally it would look like, again, someone living 2,000 years ago, a spherical lead ball being fired from the muzzle of a gun. It's like, that's how they would interpret it. That's how they would claim. That's how they would say it. The grass being burned up, that's no man's land in France, where it's just mud and just desolate earth. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A lot of people say that has to be an asteroid. I differ from that, because again, to understand the book of Revelation, you have to use the book of Daniel to understand it. And in Daniel, nations or great empires are mountains. This is also why people misunderstand the seven-headed dragon in Revelation, that it's not Rome. It's not the city of seven hills. It's actually Mecca, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's these mountains are empires. So the question is, was there an empire in the sea that fire is connected to? And the answer is yes. That is World War II. Japan was an empire. We not only did we drop 2 nuclear weapons on it, we also firebombed Tokyo several times. The firebombing of Tokyo killed way more people than both of the nuclear blasts. It was insane.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And there's so many people who probably don't even know that. I just learned that just now.
Yeah. And here's the weird thing: World War II, 1/3 of all the ships, both military and merchant, were destroyed. And according to Greenpeace themselves, this is not my number, this is Greenpeace's number. 1/3 of all ocean life has died since World War II.
Really?
Yes.
That's weird. Wow. That's so sad.
And this is where, now again, I think the first two, I think there's a solid argument for that. Yeah, I was surprised by that, and particularly the species. I was like, okay, that's interesting. The third one is where I'm going to start being like, I'm iffy on this one. It's wormwood, right? The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell in a third of the rivers and the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So this one, the argument is that it's actually Chernobyl, and the answer and the reason for that argument is this.
What's Chernobyl? Is that a country?
No. Wait. Am I that much older than you? Chernobyl is the nuclear power plant in Russia that melted down.
Okay.
Well, now I'm feeling older. So someone mentioned, like, the other day, it's like, if Marty McFly went back and was happening today, he would go back to 1992, and I'm like, I hate knowing this fact.
Whoa! Oh,
yeah. So it made me feel old, and so now this is making me feel even older.
Well, I was in high school, so whatever.
Yeah, there you go. So Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant in Russia. They actually disengaged a lot of the safety features on it because they were doing certain tests, and the tests got out of control, and it literally melted down. Chernobyl is the biggest nuclear power plant event in the history of man. And here's the thing: Chernobyl means wormwood in Ukrainian.
No,
I said Ukraine. Yeah, it does.
Whoa!
Because wormwood, we treat wormwood like it's a name. Yeah, wormwood is not a name. It's when it talks about it says it's called wormwood That's great. But the thing is, wormwood means it's a very specific type of plant. It's poisonous.
Oh, it's a poisonous plant. Okay.
Right. But it also means bitter. It's also, however, it's used in certain medicines. Like, again, in certain proper proportions, it can be used as a medicine. It used to be used as a medication all throughout the ancient world up until very, very recently. In fact, it's also included in certain food stuffs and things like that because it's very, very bitter. But it's a plant. Chernobyl means wormwood in Ukrainian. And like I had heard that, I'm like, that can't be the case. And I double checked with a dude who I knew who was Ukrainian. He spoke Ukrainian as his first language. And I'm like, by the way, Chernobyl, does that mean wormwood? He goes, oh yeah, absolutely.
I gotta look this up. This is crazy.
It was nuts. Well, so here's the real reason for the argument. It's that when it exploded, right, the isotopes got into the atmosphere and literally rained down all over Europe and mostly Europe, but it came all the way to North America. And so, and so a lot of these isotopes got into the water. And in the early 90s, the WHO put out a video saying, hey, we're going to see a massive spike in cancer deaths in the late 90s and early 2000s. They're like, we need to prepare for this because that isotope got into the water through the rain, because it rained for a long time because it all just got in the atmosphere and it rained down, got into the waters. And so people were really drinking this radioactive isotope. Its half-life was like 15, 20 years. They're like, this is going to be a huge problem. So the argument is that that's what that is. While I think it's a solid argument, I do have a problem with this argument. And that is,
okay.
So again, I want to give all sides of this argument. My problem is stars always indicate angels in the Old Testament and here in the New Testament.
Okay.
So since the star is named wormwood, that's sort of my problem with it. It's a nuclear power plant. A lot of people say, well, stars are nuclear powered, but they're different, right? That's fusion. This is a fission plant. So even that doesn't match up as far as I'm concerned. So that's my main problem, is it says the star does it. This is the star doing this. But that being said, doesn't mean that their argument is wrong. But I certainly don't necessarily agree that the fourth trumpet is blown. I don't think that's happened yet. And certainly the rest of them haven't.
What they said on my YouTube channel is they said the second seal will be broken at March 30th this year. Like, what are they talking about? Like, what? What is the second seal anyway? I don't even know.
The second seal is the red.
Dang, you got this stuff memorized.
Yeah, it's that one's the red. That one's the Red Rider.
The Red Rider. And what does the Red Rider do?
War.
Okay.
So the first one,
that's not good.
Well, so an argument on that, again, I have yet to see an interpretation of the seals that I agree with in its entirety, right?
Do you know where that is in Revelation? Like, where do we go?
I think it's chapter. I want to say it's 6, 5 or 6.
Chapter 6. Let's look it up. Sixth seal, first seal, second. Here we go. Second seal. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Horse, fiery red." Dang, you got this stuff memorized. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given him a great sword. Conflict on the earth. Okay.
Yeah, one argument for that is that the white horse is the Catholic Church, the red horse is communism, the black horse is capitalism, and the pale horse, which is, a lot of people have argued it's actually should be like a pale green. That's actually, the color is green, not like pale white or gray, is Islam. And that the 4 seals represent 4 world systems that exist, and that make up the end times. I think there's an argument to be made there. I'm not in love with it, though.
I'll tell you what, I love the Book of Revelation, but I don't understand any of it.
Well, neither does anyone else, really. So so it makes you feel better. So the argument that the wormwood star is Jesus, that doesn't work, because we know the name of the star is wormwood. So it can't be Jesus.
And also, I do think that there are worms in wood, because that's what the woodpeckers are doing. They're reaching their tongue in there and pulling the worms out.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they're doing?
Oh yeah.
They're pulling
Well,
something out of the tree.
all kinds of insects. Yes. I mean, they're insectivores.
Just insects. Maybe there's no worms. I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, there are. I mean, there are worms, but there's all kinds of insects in trees.
Rolling
that's what they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, hold on.
Elaine Seal Sloan says she's a Bible scholar and a teacher of over 30 years. I'll just keep quiet, lol.
No, it's fine. Everyone has a different. Yeah, we want.
Why would you keep quiet? We want to hear. We want to know what the expert says.
But again, that's so Elaine was mentioning wormwood references to water being poisoned. Yes, the water was poisoned, but the star itself is also called wormwood. Like, that's absolutely part of the text. So it's not. So it's not Satan. It's specifically not Satan. Specifically not Jesus. And Jesus is the bright morning star, to the reference that again, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Quasi was mentioning. But it's the problem is that is actually a reference to this. That's this difference between saying the bright morning star and saying a star, right? In the Old Testament, again, stars are angels, which again is my problem with the entire Chernobyl argument, is that it sounds like an angel's doing this rather than necessarily a nuclear power plant. Yeah. So that's my argument with that one.
Speaking of the bright morning star, of all the different things that I've posted and shared on Facebook, it was the one about the bright morning star, about Isaiah 14, when it says the bright morning star. The King James says Lucifer.
Yeah.
And I've gotten more shares on that than any other thing I've written online. And it's your book that I'm sharing on there. When you wrote that book, Lucifer is not Satan.
And because it's Venus. I mean, that's the son of the dawn in the Hebrew word. It's Venus that's being talked about, right?
Yeah, I mean, we call it Venus. They didn't call it Venus. We will say, oh, that's not a star, that's a planet. Well, they called it a star. And they called it, what do they call it? The light bearer, the light bringer, because it would show it's the brightest star in the sky, and then it also comes up in the morning right before the sun, or it'll show up in the evening right after the sun goes down.
Yeah, well, and particularly when it's in the morning, it is the brightest star in the sky. In fact, there's a lot of stories, particularly back when trains first started running, of trains actually shutting down, right? And they would shut down the train because they thought another train was coming because of where Venus would fall in the sky. So they thought because they were running east-west, so they thought they were looking at another. Yeah,
that's how bright it was. Wow.
So yeah, all opinions are welcome. We're having conversation. That's the entire point, right? To have the conversation.
When the light at the end of the tunnel is the headlights of an oncoming train. Oh wait, no, it's just Venus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that again happened all the time. But
really, that's so interesting.
Well, in us, right, that's one of those things where we often we just don't understand what life was like even 150 years ago, right? We don't understand because we have nothing but light pollution. We have lived our entire lives. Most of our grandfathers lived their entire lives in the presence of artificial light. Like, you have to go back almost 3 generations before you can find people who regularly encountered no light pollution. So for us, I mean, us looking at when we the night sky to us is very different to what it was to the average person even 150 years ago.
Okay, I got a question. Elaine Seal Sloan says Luke 10:19. It disappeared. Luke 10:19 is where Lucifer is described as a star.
Yeah, no, and he is described as a star. All angels are described as stars in the Old Testament.
Oh, I think she meant Luke 10:18 when it says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven."
Yeah,
and then 19 after that. Okay, I was confused.
Yep. So again, that's why again when you look at the Book of Revelation, you have to look at Daniel very, very specifically, but then you have to look at the Old Testament. The metaphors there are there for reasons to help us interpret it. And again, stars are angels. That's not like that's again that's my primary argument about why I'm not a fan. I think I'm open to it being Chernobyl, and I think there's a way to make that work. But I don't like making things work. I like when things are obvious. So.
Yeah. Usually the thing that there's so many times when people try to like make things work. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the arguments that they use against the Apocrypha are that way, and a lot of the arguments in favor of evolution are that way, trying to force millions of years of evolution into the creation week. It just doesn't work.
Well, and again, it's like we do have to understand, like talking about the creation week, like the problem is when we oftentimes, and this is where we get like Lilith, right? The problem is in the Western world, our literature is radically different from how the Eastern thought was, right? Is that there's, the Eastern thought approached things poetically. There, the everyone's trying to reconcile the first and the second chapters, but it's like, well, but you don't have to reconcile them. They have two different purposes. These aren't two different texts being put together, just being stapled together. They're two different texts trying to tell two different stories. The first story is about God. He's the star. About him, not the star literally, but I mean he's the one that the verse is about. It's a temple text. That's what it's about. Chapter 2 is about the creation of Adam. That's the focus. Adam is the star in that one. So it's like we have to realize we don't need to reconcile them. We just need to realize they were being written both poetically, but for two different purposes. Mm-hmm. But even that's an argument that we can't have. It goes back to the original point.
Taters.
Yep.
I was reading
I saw it too.
Taters. Yeah. You ever seen that YouTube video?
Which one? I've seen many YouTube videos. Yes.
The taters one.
Not that I remember.
Taters, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. Boil them, mash them, stick them in. You ever seen that?
I mean, I saw the original movie. Yeah.
Yeah. The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to throw you off. I was just.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, it's just. But even the argument, the comment I'm making here. Let's go back to the whole point about creationists. Is like. I make the argument. I'm over here saying, hey, let's actually look at the text and realize maybe we're dealing again. Heiser was the first one who pointed it out, as far as I was aware, and how he explained it was brilliant. It's like, hey, this isn't necessarily trying to tell us the origin of the world per se. It's really focusing more on the universe as God's temple. That he created the universe to be his temple, and that this is the point. It's not necessarily, it shouldn't, we don't have to make it work with chapter 2, right? There's the argument that chapter, it's like, well, how do we fit chapter 2 to chapter 1? Because there seem to be some discrepancies there as far as like when man was created, when animals were created, etc. It's like, you're making them, you're fighting them when they aren't intended to be fought. They're intended to be read as two different stories with two different objectives. One is about the creation of man. The other one is about God creating the temple that he lives in, which is the universe we have.
We're talking about Genesis 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of people who want to try to say that
chapter 1 and chapter 2 is not
chapter 1 and chapter 2, they're contradictory to one another, and they're not. If you really study Genesis 1 and 2, they don't contradict. You just have to understand, what's being said. Like, for example, chapter 1. It says Adam and Eve were both made. Well, it says male and female were both made on day 6.
Yeah.
So the 6th day of creation, God made man and woman both on the same day. And then you get to chapter 2, and it says God made man first, and then woman wasn't created yet. But then I turn my phone on silent. And so in chapter 2, it says God creates Adam, and then he has Adam name off all these animals. And I think that typically we think, oh, well, it would have taken him a long time to name off all the animals, Mm-hmm. It would have taken him weeks, maybe months to name off all these animals. And then after naming off all those animals, then he creates Eve. And so it's like, oh, it's a contradiction. Genesis 1 says Adam and Eve were made on the same day, and then Genesis 2 says that Adam and Eve were made, a long time apart from one another. Well, the truth of the matter is, does it really say that it took weeks or months to name off all those animals? How long does it really take to name off the animals? I can name off all the nations of the world in under 10 minutes, because I memorized that Animaniac song, United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru.
I'm not getting a YouTube slam for copyright infringement for the Animaniacs.
Yeah, but yeah, it more than likely naming off the animals wouldn't have taken that long. And we think, oh, but there's millions and millions of species it would have taken. So no, he didn't name off every single species. Okay. Can you imagine Adam in the Garden of Eden saying, okay, that's the Indian rhinoceros, and that's the black rhinoceros, and that's the white rhinoceros, and that's the Javan rhinoceros, and that's the woolly rhino. Seriously? He just named off the rhino. He's just naming off basic.
Well, but here's the even the thing, right? So just to make certain we're all on the same page, the problem is chat can get mixed around. So Elaine, we are specifically referring. I think she's talking to Titan specifically about Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 and then verses 2 in the difference there. Specifically, the conversation we're having is that Nathan and I are currently having is chapter 1 of Genesis and then chapter 2 of Genesis. So I just want to make certain everyone is on the same page on that.
Yeah.
So so back to the point of, we don't even have to go that far into it about it's like there's an easy way to reconcile it, which is to say that again, what's happening in Genesis 2 is about the domesticated animals. It's not even about the creation of animals, because it could be just the domesticated animals that are brought before him. And he doesn't name, because again, to the Hebrews, cattle are cattle. Like, I'm certain they may have had specific names for specific breeds, but they would have just said cattle, right?
Well, not only that,
well, that one's a bison and that one's an auroch and this one's that.
Not only that, but it doesn't even say, that he named off all the animals in the ocean, and that's
but there's so hold on. Why is that the case? It's not because he's only brought the land animals, the animals of the sky, because again, we're thinking at it from a Western 21st century perspective. To them, naming something meant authority. Man had authority over the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, because this is where we belong. The sea is chaos. To them, the sea was the place, which is why, like, Leviathan is a stand-in for Satan in the Old Testament, except for Job. That's a whole other conversation. But it's like, that's why Leviathan is so often a stand-in for Satan, is because the ocean is chaos, right?
I think anybody who's ever seen Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid, that whole musical number was chaos. I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's, yeah. I mean, it's just not where people belong, right? I mean, this is, again, because we can reliably sail the ocean and not die. It's like, it's hard for us to remember that, for people living 3,000 years ago, crossing the ocean, not even like what we would consider the ocean, crossing the Sea of Galilee was a real hazard, right?
Mm-hmm.
That crossing the Mediterranean Sea was a legitimate life-threatening endeavor. Like, we fail to recognize that, particularly poetically, the ocean is the symbol for chaos. It's where humanity does not belong. Also, mountains is symbolic of highness, being closer to God. Because again, and we see this, like, the worst part is it's even retained in when we think of, like, the Greek gods. Where do they live? Mount Olympus. Well, we know, like, even we say, okay, they live on Mount Olympus, but it's not literally Mount Olympus. It's sort of like a metaphor. To the ancient world, the top of the mountains is where the deities live. That's why Eden is described as a mountain, as the mountain of God in the Old Testament, because he's saying that's it's close to God. It's not saying it's literally a mountain. It's saying that's their metaphor, to be where humans won't be. Because again, every mountain in the world has been climbed. People have stood up there and seen the top of every mountain of the world, but for them, you didn't climb the top of mountains. That was insane. You couldn't survive it.
Yeah, a lot of people have died trying to climb Mount Everest. But anyway,
they die all the time. Yeah,
that was one example, though, of how they try to say that Genesis 1 and 2 contradict, and they really don't. It just comes down to the fact that Adam named off the animals in less than a day, and then Eve was created later on in that day. And there's so many times, and I've heard, I don't know how many people say this. I've heard Bill Maher say it, like, oh, well, that's contradictory, or other people. They say, well, in Genesis 1, Adam and Eve were made at the same time. In Genesis 2, they're made apart from one another. It's like, no, Genesis 1 says Adam and Eve were made on the same day. And in Genesis 2, that's entirely possible in Genesis 2, that Adam named off the animals in less than a day, and then Eve was created later on in that day. It's not a contradiction. And the same thing is true with the plants. People say, well, in Genesis 1, it says that the plants were made on day 3, and then man was made on day 6, right? So plants were made on day 3. And then you get to Genesis 2, and it says, before any plant of the field was in the earth, before any shrub of the field had yet sprung up, God formed man from the dust of the ground. And you're just like, wait, what? So in Genesis 1, it says plants are made before man. And now it's saying before the plants were made, God started creating man. And it's kind of confusing. Like, that seems contradictory, It's not contradictory, because you'll notice in Genesis 2, it says, before any plant of the field was in the earth, before any shrub of the field had yet sprung up. Now think about that. Think about what it means for something to be a plant of the field, okay? Think about moss that grows underneath the water. Is that a plant of the field? Or think about...
Not last time I checked.
Think about the pine trees and the raspberry bushes that grow on the side of a steep mountain. Is that a field? That's not a field. That's the side of a steep mountain. Or think about the jungle, the plants of the jungle. It's not a field. It's a jungle. Plants of the forest. That's of the forest. It's not a field. Or even the plants of a garden. There's a difference between the garden that you have in your backyard and the field of wheat or corn or soybeans that you have out there. That's different from the little garden of cucumbers and tomatoes, and stuff you have in your garden, strawberries that you have in your garden. It's saying before any plants of the field had yet sprung up on the earth. It's not saying that man was made before plants. It's saying that man was created before the plants of the field had yet sprung up. And it says the reason why is because, number one, it hadn't rained, and also there was no man to till the ground. So why are there no plants in the field? There's no man to till the ground. That's the reason why. Adam. And so it's saying that outside the Garden of Eden, when God created the plants, there was a field that was outside the Garden of Eden that God had left empty. He had left an empty dirt field. And it says that God created man from the dust of the earth. And then it says that he took the man and placed him in the garden. Two times it says that he took the man and he placed him in the garden. Adam was created outside the garden in an empty dirt field. And then he placed him in the garden. And then after Adam and Eve sinned, they got kicked out of the garden, and he had to till the ground of the field. He said, from dust you were created, to dust you shall return. He was put back into that empty dirt field and told, till the ground. It was still empty at the time they were kicked out of the garden. That field was still empty.
Well, and to your point, and by the way, I like Elaine's comment about how Hebrew, a word is what a thing does, whereas in English it's what a thing is. I like that comment, by the way. That's a great way of explaining it. It's much more succinct than anything I've come up with, but I think it's a great way of saying that. But to your point, I mean, the word field that's used in Genesis 2, right? This is before any shrub of the field has come up. It's that word field, its primary usage is cultivated field, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of the, so again, this goes back to, there doesn't, since the texts are trying to do two different things, first and foremost, they're trying to do two different things. So we don't necessarily need to even make them work together, because they're trying to tell two different stories with two different emphasis, right? One is on God, the other one's on the creation of man. Um, and so it's, and again, there's different words here. I actually did, unfortunately, the word animal in there didn't, when I looked up the Hebrew word originally when I was going through this, I remember thinking, okay, I actually had the question, is like, was there a difference between the animals here and the animals here? As far as word usage, did one mean like domesticated animals, the other one meant like just broader? It's not necessarily in the text that way. So, but I still think what we're talking about is cultivate, or domesticated animals being brought before Adam. But I think the bigger point here is, someone could hold this. Again, this is not my position, but I think someone could hold this position, right? That because it just says man and woman were created on the sixth day. But again, these are the idea that these would be metaphorical days, etc. That God creates humanity, but then again, that chapter 2, he creates Adam specifically and Eve specifically to be the high priests over humanity, to be our representative before God. That's one argument that has been made, and that the created from the dust of the earth is not necessarily literal dust, but what he's saying is he's choosing someone from from the group of humans he has created to be the priest before God and humanity. I disagree with that wholly, right? Not HOLY, but WHOLLY. I disagree with that interpretation, but it certainly works and does not do violence to the text, right? I think oftentimes in trying to reconcile some of the things, we do true violence to the text. And so it's one of those things where we also just need to stop and recognize these chapters, these stories have different purposes, right? And so in that, particularly when you talk about Adam, this is about domestication. This is about order. It's about giving mankind dominion over the earth. Like, that's the focus of the story. The problem is that we, in the modern age, we look at things in a very particular way. In fact, just going back 500 years, let me tell you how crazy this is. Our worldview is so radically different from our ancestors. Just 500 years ago, beavers were fish. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding.
What? You have to explain that one.
So, in the ancient world, right, there were certain things you couldn't eat meat on certain days because for religious reasons and but also there were legal rights to certain animals. This comes out of France, and of course the English adopted it. The aristocracy owned certain animals in certain lands, but fish were sort of considered fair game, right? So like even 500 years ago, if you'd ask someone could bring in a beaver and they would eat it and they would consider it a fish.
That's so
now
weird.
To us, that's insane.
Yeah.
But that's because our worldview is radically different from theirs. Our interpretation of events is radically different from theirs. We have to remember, whenever we're looking at the text of the Bible, this is an Eastern mindset. These are people who lived thousands of years ago. Their worldview is radically different. And also, this ties into like the whole the Elijah's wheel thing. I will be doing a full video on that soon. That's like, we do this drawing of this weird spinning globe rail thing. It's like he's talking about a chariot wheel. Because that verse, and I think this is where I will not speak for anyone like say Michael Heiser. Like, I won't speak for him in this regard, but I do think, judging by what he has said, I think this is where like I would vary from him. I think he's looking at it as Elijah is deliberately penning this.
Would no.
Yeah, exactly. I get it. It's that Elijah doesn't literally see this vision, right? That rather it's a it's a framing technique for what he's about to write. But then what he's clearly doing is throwing shade at Babylonian theology, right? Because Marduk is in this chair that has wheels in their theology. But I do believe that he actually does see this. Now the question becomes, is God showing him this in a way that he will understand what's happening? I think that's probably the case. I don't think God's throne literally has wheels. What he's seeing is a message to him, and God is using the image so that Elijah can speak to both the Israelites and to the broader culture, right? Because all throughout the prophets' writings are the shade is being thrown all the time at the surrounding cultures, right? Like going back to the idea of Leviathan in Isaiah, Leviathan is a stand-in for Tiamat, but it's also a stand-in for Satan. Because what Isaiah is doing in that text, and we don't see it because of our language, is he's connecting. He's throwing shade at the Babylonians' goddess Tiamat, the chaos in their chaos Kampf story, but he's also connecting everything to Satan in the Garden of Eden. But we miss all of that because of our cultural understanding.
You say to Elaine's question, she said, "Was it were they 24-hour days, the days of creation?"
I think you could. I think so. Here's let me throw it out here one more time.
I think they were 24-hour days.
I think the word, while the word means 24-hour days, the question becomes, who says they were even days? Because what I mean by this is this. Let me take this metaphor one step further. I'm sorry. I'm gonna push this all the way to the edge, and this is why I think we do need to look at chapter 1 as more of a temple text than anything else. There are things I pull out of it, but a day, right, is based on the rising and setting of the sun. The sun isn't even created until like day 4, right? Same thing with the stars, etc. Well, let me ask it this way: was Adam made as a zygote?
What's a zygote? Oh, is that like
the earliest stage
of the womb?
When you are
no, he was created a fully created man.
Great.
Yeah.
Question: when Jesus turned water into wine, it was that again. Wine takes time. They said it's the best wine. That takes a long time to ferment, right?
The older the wine, the better it tastes. Meaning
exactly.
The wine that Jesus made instantaneously tasted better and therefore tasted older.
Yeah,
it wasn't
much older.
It wasn't older. It was literally made in less than a minute. It was minute made wine.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing. So if the animals were made ostensibly sexually mature, if Adam was made ostensibly sexually mature, that would mean the plants were probably of maturity on and on and on.
Yeah.
Then wouldn't God create a universe that is mature? And so what I mean by the whole question of the days is we're like, well, is it 24 hours or is it's like, well, but what if those are just, what if that's literally meaningless to God? We're trying to make it makes like God is limited by this. He's telling us a story in a way that make sense to us. He is trying to explain something so far beyond our understanding that it's entirely lost on us. What he's trying to point out is the message, though, that that God is not the universe. He created the entirety of the universe to be his temple. That means the universe is supposed to be holy. It's supposed to be the place where God is with us. He's not supposed to be separate from us in the universe. That sin has created the separation, right? That's the message of the point. So it's like we're trying to figure out from a 21st century perspective what's the scientific meaning behind this book or this story. And the problem is that's not the point of the story. I think someone said best this way. I forget who said it. It may have been Heiser. Imagine a scientist goes up to a little girl and says, "Hey, do you know where your little brother came from?" And the little girl says, "Well, my mommy and daddy really loved each other, and that's how we got my brother." And he starts laughing at her and chastising her because he's like, "Let me scientifically explain it to you," right? It's like they're two different perspectives.
Yeah.
She's not trying to tell you the physicality. She is explaining a higher concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the problem here is we're trying to make something fit something that's not we're trying to make it something it's not designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's sort of the point here. And the problem is the entire Old Testament reads this way. It's like it's trying to convey certain things, and we keep trying to put our ideas on top of it instead of saying, well, why don't we understand it for what it is and then draw out of that?
Yeah.
We're trying to make a square peg fit a round hole. And that's our problem. And that leads to all the problems again amongst the denominations. Because we're looking at it. In fact, we look at the Old Testament from the wrong perspective. We look at it from a New Testament perspective. We had to make the New Testament make sense. You have to understand the Old Testament in its context first.
Yeah, a lot of times you do. Now, I think that those days were 24-hour days, and a lot of times people say, "Well, the sun wasn't created until day 4," which is true. The sun wasn't made until day 4.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it couldn't have been a 24-hour period.
Well, the thing is, though, light was created on day 1. And so if people say, oh, well, the day is determined by the sun rising and setting. No, the day is determined by the light and the darkness. And God made that on the very first day. He made even the morning and the first day. And so I think on the very first day, you have light. There's no sun. It's just God made light. Where's the light coming from? It's coming from God. He made it. And
if you want to push it, I'll take it. I'll take it one step further. I don't think it's actually even light necessarily that's being talked about here. Metaphorically, I think it is. But really, what he's talking about, because what's the first day he creates light and darkness, right? But it's the creation of light. Day 2 is the separation of the waters, right, and the creation of the firmament, in the space between. Day 1 is the creation of light. Day 2 is the creation of space. Light is the time and the speed of light are intertwined. We know this. They're inextricably combined. In order to have a universe, for anything to exist, you have to have space and you have to have time. I think what God is describing isn't the planet Earth, because we have to remember, to the ancient Hebrews, they didn't have this conception of a planet floating in space. For them, the material world was the Earth. That was all there was. So when they mean the Earth, they mean the material plane of existence. We know scientifically that you have to have space and you have to have time. In fact, we call it space-time because it's the same thing. You can't have one without the other.
So crazy. It's so crazy to wrap your mind around that. Like, it's just like,
I would argue that the first 2 days is the creation of space-time itself. That's what he's doing, and he's giving it to us in a poetic way. But again, that's an opinion. I won't die on that particular hill because that's only one reading of it. Again, I prefer the reading of it's trying to tell us a point that God is because again, like the word. Hold on, let me pull it up because the word used for like the waters in chapter 1. Hold on, let me pull it up because I cannot remember it off the top of my head. And I do not ever trust my pronunciation of anything. Right? Hold on. It's So when it says, in darkness was over the face of the deep, right? This deep, the word here, let me see if I can pull up the pronunciation for it, it's okay, again, Texan, don't trust my pronunciation on anything. It's tehome or tehome. Now it's essentially a derivative from the same word that the word Tiamat comes from, right? From the Babylonians. Again, we have to remember, to the ancient world, right? The word, these things had different meanings. the sea was the chaos, right? All these ancient world stories had this chaos story of this chaos dragon being slain and the world being made, or some version of it, by the hero, right? Which is usually the king god. But the idea is the chaos had to be overcome. But in the Hebrew version, that word, the deep, is basically the same root word that Tiamat comes out of. It doesn't need to be subdued. God doesn't have to conquer that deep. It's already under his control. So it's like, even there, it's lost on us entirely in English. But it's not, it's not, it wouldn't have been lost on them, because they would have said, our God is the one, like, he doesn't need to conquer the waters. He doesn't need to conquer or slay the dragon. The chaos doesn't even compare with him. He's already there, which is why when it pops up later, right, in Isaiah, or in Psalms, because Leviathan is that stand-in for the Chaos Conf dragon. It's, they're using that as a way of throwing shade at those gods, right? The Ugaritic version, which is Lotan, and the Babylonian version, which is Tiamat. Like, they're throwing shade on. So again, the whole point is there's poetry being here. It doesn't mean there isn't some reality to it. It just means it's not necessarily, we're reading it. The problem is we're trying to read it the wrong way. There's a different message being written to the ancient Hebrew that we miss because our culture is different and our language is different.
Mm-hmm. Now, one person says here that you're discussing the recreation. What do you think that means?
Okay, so there's a legitimate argument on this, that Genesis 1:1, and this is what Elaine was alluding to much earlier, that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, that it's called the gap theory, that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is about the initial creation of the universe, and that Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 is a recreation of the universe, right? That there was a pre-Adamic race, and most people tie this into the fall of Satan, right? That there was a pre-Adamic race, and these are, some people will say they're the angels, some people will say there's something else. There's a lot of there's disagreement, but that it's a recreation of the thing in chapter 2, so that the 6 days aren't it's the creation of modern man, and by modern man I mean Homo sapien, right? Adam and Eve. It's that the earth is older than 6,000 years, but that the creation of humanity and all that is what it was. It's the earth is being refilled with it. That the waters over the waters over the earth was had destroyed a previous previous world, right? So that's the argument between on the gap theory. Again, pre-Adamites, and again, usually they tie that into the angels and Satan, right? That Satan was a king, etc. So let me use this moment. I'll come back to it, but I want to use this to answer something Titan asked earlier, right? About Lucifer. It's like, isn't Lucifer Satan, right? Isn't that Satan's name in Isaiah? Isaiah 14. And
Lucy,
let me pull up
guy with diamonds.
Exactly.
LSD.
Oh yeah. So let me pull up Isaiah 14 real quick, because again, my book, we mentioned that earlier. I would argue that Lucifer is not the name of Satan. It is the prophetic name of the Antichrist. In the same way that the name given by Isaiah to Jesus, and I just forgot it. Again, I'm terrible with names. But
Isaiah, when it says the one that means God with us.
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot it. But it's like the name that Isaiah gives Jesus is different from the name that he actually has. Well, because it's a prophetic name, right? It's more telling us about what it is.
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew, it's like I can see it, and the problem is then the song El Shaddai popped in my head. I'm like, I know that's not it, but I can't not hear it now, and I'm like, oh, it's throwing me off. So in Isaiah, we have Jesus' prophetic name being given, and Emmanuel, because it means God with us. That's his prophetic name. I would argue Isaiah is doing the same thing with Lucifer. Lucifer is the prophetic name of the Antichrist.
And your prophetic name is the color of your underwear plus the last thing that you ate.
Yeah, exactly.
You ever seen those things on Facebook?
Yes.
Your rap name is so stupid. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's pretty much the same thing. But so I hate those. By the way, don't ever play those games. Okay, completely derailed.
I always put false information on there. I'll say it's like,
don't ever do those things. They are mining your data. So this is how you get hacked.
Why I purposely put false information on there, like, oh yeah, I drink motor oil or something stupid like that, like not even real. Because exactly. They're trying to get your information. Thanks.
So okay, so cheese freak, it is not. Okay, Jesus and Emmanuel are two different words. The thing is, Jesus is a Greek transliteration. By the way, there's some idiots running around trying to say that it's that Jesus is just a Greek version of Horus. That is not the case. Jesus is literally the transliteration of the word Joshua. So again, it's Yeshua in its so Jesus' actual name was Yeshua in the Aramaic at the time. It was Yeshua. That's Joshua. That is what his name was. But they transliterated it as Jesus because that's the transliteration, right? Of Joshua is Jesus in Greek.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
That's what you find in the Greek Septuagint. The book of Joshua is called the book of Jesus.
Yeah,
and
there's meaning to that too.
And Zechariah talks about the high priest Joshua.
Yeah.
In our translations, the Greek Septuagint says the high priest Jesus. In Zechariah in the Greek Septuagint.
Yeah, and there's this is one of the big, again, I don't want to completely derail. I want to go back to the Lucifer thing, but yeah, this is why a lot of people, it's like, why was there such an emphasis on Jesus casting out demons during his ministry? Well, because he's the new Joshua. That's a big thing. Like, that's a big metaphor throughout his narrative. So his name is Joshua, and if we were to translate his name into English, we would call him Joshua. But Jesus is the Greek transliteration. We left it as the Greek transliteration because we want the name to stand out as separate from every other name in the Bible. It was to keep it as holy. Now, you could argue that that's a bad idea because we missed the connection to Joshua of the Old Testament, right? You can make that argument, and I think it's a valid argument, but that's what it is. That's why the name is different. That's it. So here's the deal. So the word Lucifer, which is given as a name and again, it's in the Latin Vulgate. This is why we get the word Lucifer, right? It's the Latin Vulgate. Well,
yeah, it's a Latin word.
Yeah, it is a name. It's the stand-in for Venus. It does mean light bringer because that's the name.
And somebody said that. Who commented that? They said, "Well, doesn't Lucifer mean light bearer?" Yeah, Cheese Frig Ginger Snap said, "I thought Lucifer was the name of the light bearer." Yeah, that's what it means.
Yeah,
lucum is Latin for light, and then bearer in Latin is fur. So it's lucum fur, light bearer. Lucifer, and that's the name that they applied to what we call the planet Venus.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same. It's saying the same thing. So why am I saying that it's not Satan? Well, let's actually just go to the text. Now, this is after the destruction of Babylon. Again, this is the prophesied destruction of Babylon, and as we've mentioned before, this is a dual fulfillment prophecy, right? For anyone who's unfamiliar with that concept, Isaiah is full of them. You make a prophecy about a thing that's going to occur, but it symbolically is actually about something else, right? And usually you see this when there's oddities in the prophecy where you're like, why are they calling this out? Why are they calling this out? Why are they mentioning this? Well, it's because ultimately it's not really about the thing that he's prophesying on. It's about something bigger, right? It's sort of like when two people were involved in a thing and this guy's the instigator, but you don't have evidence for it. And so you're yelling at this guy, but you're looking at the other guy. It's the way of saying, I know you did this. it's the same idea, right?
Yeah, kind of like in Suicide Squad, where he's like, "Oh, you thought I was talking to you? Now I was talking to your boss."
Boss, exactly.
I remember
Yes, exactly. It's like that's
yeah, you're right. I need
exactly
some
it.
lines.
That's
so bright.
yeah. I know. Luckily, in the near future, I will have. I'm still going to be here instead of getting a separate thing. I'm going to do an entire. I'll be able to redo all of this as a standalone broadcast booth, so I can actually control the lighting.
Yeah,
I'm so looking forward to it. So yeah, but that's what a dual fulfillment prophecy is. Isaiah 13 is the fall of Babylon, which I would argue is ultimately Babylon the Great, and that's a whole other conversation. But Isaiah 14 is the fall of the king of Babylon, right? This is his fall. And so a lot of people say, okay, well, it's, he calls himself, they call him Lucifer, again, the light bringer as a name. So this is a stand-in for Satan because this is Satan's fall, right? That's the argument made. But let me actually read the text. We've had the destruction of Babylon. Now it moves on to the king of Babylon. But it says, "For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will choose Israel and will set them in their own land. And sojourners will join them and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. They will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppress them." So yes, all of these things did occur in the initial fall of Babylon. That all happened, right? But again, this is a dual fulfillment prophecy, and this is where things get
fulfillment, where it's like it's about Babylon, but it's also prophetic about the devil, I guess.
Yeah, well,
or I guess what you're going to say, it's prophetic about the Antichrist,
right? And this is where it gets to it, right? 14:3, it says, "When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service which you were made to serve, you, meaning the house of Israel, will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon." So we need to pause right there. Literally every line following is part of this taunt. So this is the imagery, right? This isn't God saying, "Oh, how you have fallen." It's like, no. This is God saying the Israelites are going to taunt the king of Babylon with this taunt. Okay. And it's very important because some people say it's a taunt. They're taunting them. It says, "How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased." Let's jump down, right? It's chanting. He's like, "Look at how powerful you are, blah, 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 blah." Right? Let's move down to 14:9. "Sheol, the land of the dead, beneath is stirred up to meet you, the king of Babylon, when you come. It rouses the shades to greet," the shades being the dead, "to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from the thrones." Remember, it's the Jews saying this, is the true Israelites saying this, not God. "It raises from their thrones all who were the kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you." So now the Jews are saying this taunt, and the Jews are saying these dead kings, ostensibly the kings that he conquered, right? And the ones that came before him are now speaking. It says, "You two have become weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as bed beneath you, and worms are your crowns. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low." Right? "You said in your heart, I will," again, you, meaning the king of Babylon, said in his heart, and again, who's saying this? It's the Jews taunting this Lucifer person, the king of Babylon. But now they're this particular part of the taunt is being said by the dead kings. "You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend to the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit." Okay. This is literally the theological equivalent to kids doing you mama jokes, right? It's, you're so ugly. Your mother said she had to tie a pork chop around your neck so the dog would play with you, right? That's what's happening here. When you make that taunt, you are not literally saying that the kid was so ugly that his mother, tied a pork chop around his neck so the dog would play with him, and the mother has literally said this. You are taunting him, right? And very specifically, it is the king of Babylon that is being spoken of in this from the Jewish perspective, right? They're taunting him. This is and by the way, say again, the Satan is cast out of heaven in the book of Revelation. He doesn't have to ascend to heaven. He's already there. He's dying. He's going to the land of the dead. This is a physical human being dying and going to the land of the dead. This is a king who had physically conquered all the nations. So let me ask the obvious question here. Is there a king anywhere in the Bible who conquers the world and then tries to claim to be God or above God?
Wow. Yeah, it kind of sounds like the Antichrist, doesn't it?
That's the Antichrist. That's what he does. That's why he sets up his stuff in the Holy of Holies. He's saying, you worship me. I'm God now. He is a physical, living, breathing human being who tries to become like God. He's conquered these other nations, and yet he dies. He is destroyed. He is cast down into Sheol, and he dies with utter contempt. If you go on in the prophecy, it talks about how he has no honor, right?
Yeah.
So it's I'm sorry, Prince of Babylon. But the whole point is this is the Antichrist prophetic. It's his prophetic name. Now, if you want to, it's not Lucifer is not Satan's pre-angelic name. The great Satan is never given a name in the Bible. Some people will argue that it's actually Azazel. I don't think
from the book of Enoch. Yeah,
from the book of Enoch. I don't believe that to be the case. I do think Azazel is a type and shadow of Satan, in the same way that there are other people, again, like Joshua is a type and shadow of Jesus, right? It's their types and shadows, but the great Satan is never named. Satan, to Elaine's point, just means adversary, right? It's a title. He's never actually named in any biblical book.
Yeah, and the word Lucifer was just a Latin word. It didn't exist in the Bible until the Latin translation, and it's just a word that literally means a planet, the planet Venus, which is the bright morning star.
Yeah.
And prior to the Latin translation, the Hebrew somebody had said it was halal or hawal. Somebody said it's pronounced hawal. And so, there's so many people who think, oh yeah, Satan's name was Lucifer before he fell from heaven. And it's like, that's just a word that was in the Latin to describe a certain star, a planet in the sky, because that bright morning star is used prophetically so much in Revelation and other places.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and so here's where things get even more interesting. In the same way that Emmanuel means God with us, it's a foretelling of what Jesus was.
Emmanuel, because the L means God. And
yeah.
So the Emmanuel means with us. So with us, God. So in English, God with us.
And that's okay. So real quick. So Elaine, yes, the scapegoat it's actually the goat for Azazel, right? That's literally what we translate a scapegoat. It literally should be the goat for Azazel. Azazel is, again, he is the demon named he's the watcher. I don't want to get on that the difference between fallen angels and demons. But he's the watcher named in the book of Enoch, who is trapped who is chained in the wilderness, and that is the I would argue the type and shadow of the devil. That, again, what we see in the book when we see it at Armageddon. And so it's, again, I understand, but that's what I'm saying. That's what it is. Is the scapegoat is going out to the demon. That's where it's coming from. That's what I'm saying. As I don't think it's the name of Satan. So the there was a point I was making and I just forgot. Oh yeah, Hallel. So again, so why is he calling him Venus? Why is he calling him this one star? Well, because I think that's the prophetic clue we need to give to what we're looking at.
Well, the
right?
Hebrew word means the shining one. Elaine was saying it's not about what it is; it's about what it does, which is true. The Hebrew word means the one that shines, the shining one. And sometimes I wonder, do you think that's where that writer Stephen King got the term for The Shining?
You know what? I actually would not be surprised.
Yeah, he probably because he's kind of into that dark kind of stuff, and he probably researched it. And Lucifer means the shining one. I'll make a movie called The Shining and make it eerie and creepy.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on Stephen King. But anyway, so one quick connection, then we can go back to it. Again, Isaiah goes through a lot of trouble to connect the idea of shining, glistening to Satan, right? And trying to tell it again to the snake in the Garden of Eden, right? The serpent. Like there's a lot of again, we could go. This could be an entire 2-hour conversation as to how and why he's doing that, but that's what he's doing, right? Is he's connecting the tempter from the garden, which we know to be Satan from the book of Revelation. He's using this idea of glistening and shining to connect throughout the entire book to Satan, right? Tiamat does the same thing because she's the glistening one. This is why Leviathan is a stand-in for Tiamat. They would have made the connection. But also why Leviathan? Well, because when it talks about in Isaiah 14 or 13, or maybe it's 14, I'm off now. It talks about the demons in the Septuagint actually reads it as the demons, right? In there, the word is actually the word's actually tan or from tanin. Well, tanin means water monster. Well, Leviathan is the highest of the water monsters. He's the king over the water monsters. So it's one of those things where he's making this connection between the shining one being evil, right, and connecting him directly to Satan. So yes, there's absolutely a connection to Satan in that point. That's why he's doing it.
Stephen King just like shiny Fords.
I don't buy that at all.
But you know what? I want a shiny Tesla.
He's high enough. Yeah, that dude's on enough drugs. That probably is what it is. Yes, Elaine, we've talked about that. I'm just using the serpent as again, just saying that event. We know it wasn't a snake. We've talked about it a lot on this channel actually. That's a triple entendre. That it's enchanter, whisper to entwine, but it's also shining. It's a triple entendre. But that's what Isaiah is doing. He's connecting these ideas in the through line. But I would argue prophetically, the reason Venus is so important, right, is that it is, again, what is the prophecy here? He's telling us where we need to look. And this ties in, maybe this is actually support for the idea that the seals are world empire, or not necessarily world empires in themselves, but world systems, and Islam being the last. The symbol for political Islam, and this is important, right? Is that there's a difference between the religious Islam and the political Islam. Political Islam, its symbol has always been the star and crescent, right?
Isn't that a moon? I thought it was a moon and a crescent moon.
Yeah, it's a crescent moon.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just called the star and crescent. But it's the crescent moon.
Oh, is there a star in there too? Sorry.
Yeah, it's the crescent moon with the star specifically. And by the way, you'll see that symbology on a lot of witchcraft material as well.
Okay, there's a star in there. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's all the same thing. Oh, no need to apologize, Elaine. We're all good. It's so that star in the star and the crescent is actually Venus. Like, that's not my theory. That is, everyone says that's what it is.
Really? That star in there? That's Venus?
It's Venus.
That's what they say?
It's the crescent. Exactly. Well, that symbol, the star and crescent, is not Islam's only. It's not a symbol that Islam created. It is the earliest symbol. I would argue goes all the way back to Nimrod. It is the earliest symbol for the right to rule politically in the world. You see it. It goes all the way back to Mesopotamians, to the Greek. To the Greeks actually turned it into the swastika that we know of today, the crux chromata. That's where the Hindus got it. That's their version of it. To the Egyptians, it's sort of the thing you see on the opposite pole, where it's the bull horns with the red solar disc in the center. That is the Star and Crescent. It's the same symbol. It's just the Egyptians' version of it. And of course, everyone interprets it a little differently, but it's the same thing. Well, why should we? Is there any other reason to look to Islam? Well, again, in Isaiah 13, let's go back to the one chapter before, which is the fall of Babylon, which I would argue is actually ultimately the fall of Babylon the Great, right? If you're reading down into it, there is this really weird section. Where'd it go? Here it is. Isaiah 13:20. So it's talking about the destruction of Babylon, and he's talking about all the things. It'll be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. And it says, it will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there. Now,
what verse is that in?
13:20. Isaiah 13:20. So let me ask this question. Of all the things that could have been mentioned about the fall of Babylon, why is he talking about Arabs pitching their tent there? Like, why? That's such a bizarre, out of the way sort of commentary to make.
Isaiah 13:20.
Well, and again, when you have dual fulfillment prophecies, there are things that often show up that you're like, man, that's weird, right?
Yeah, why does he mention the Arabs? What's that all about?
Well, again, because I would argue that the Babylon the Great in Revelation is Mecca. That is what they are talking about. That's the city that's not Rome, it's Mecca. And there's a whole long argument for that. But and we're running to we're coming to the end of the hour here. So without going into all I'll be doing videos on all of these so we can actually get into it in all the detail.
I got a question. Are you able to put these scripture verses on the screen so that people can see?
Sort of, kind of. Hold
and
on.
Are you able to do it in the Greek Septuagint? Because that's really fun.
Yeah.
Can I show you? It's so funny. Here, let me put it close to the camera if you can see it. Can you see?
Really read. Yeah, I can't really read it.
Let me get close. Let me get really close here. Okay, is that too dark?
Can you read that? Are you talking about the donkey centaurs?
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
But look at verse 21. But the wild animals of the desert will rest there, and their houses will be filled with noise. Sirens will rest there, and demons will dance there. Verse 22. Yes. Donkey centaurs will dwell there, and hedgehogs. And isn't that funny?
And I like the hedgehogs.
I'm sure there's a legitimate explanation for that.
Well, there is. Those are actually all, again. So that word donkey, the word. Hold on. So okay, I know where it comes from. It's the Greek word, because I again did that.
Well, before you get into that, explain what you're getting at with the Arabs being mentioned.
So hold on to Elaine. Yes, at this point, probably most of them are. But yes, Arabians are descended from Abraham through. Well, at least that is the claim made by Islam. But by this point, I mean, he had more than 2 kids. Abraham he was the father of nations. At this point, probably everyone anywhere near the Middle East is
Ishmaelites, Midianites, and a bunch of other ites.
Yeah, they're all there. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm pointing to this. The point here is that there are Arabians who pitch their tents in Mecca today. It's during the Hajj. Mecca, everyone has to make their way to Mecca. They literally, the Saudi royal family literally has tents that they pitch there. Now, people have chastised them for it because these are not tents. These are way elaborate. Like, these are amazing tents. But the point is, they're still there. So again, why is Isaiah calling out this one thing, or why is God through Isaiah calling out this one point? Because ultimately, as a dual fulfillment prophecy, he's talking about Babylon the Great. Babylon the Great, I would argue, is Mecca. So yes, no, Abraham had plenty of sons, and again, the entire region is filled with Abraham's descendants. That's the whole point. But why call that out in the original fall of Babylon? And again, it's just for all the things Babylon is known. Why are these people pitching their tents there a thing? Well, because that's what's happening today. it's Mecca that we're talking about here. And again, that's why we need to look to the Islamic world, not Rome, not the EU, for the Antichrist. He's going to come out of Turkey, which is, ancient Assyria and classic Greece.
Syria was in Turkey.
Yeah,
because I know let's see here. I know northern Iraq is where the capital of Assyria was, Nineveh.
One of them, yes.
Yeah, and there was another capital, Dur-Sharakin or something like that.
All of these nations have sometimes have numerous things, but yeah, that's definitely it.
Well, even America had numerous capitals. I mean, at the beginning, we had New York City as the capital, and then it switched Philadelphia, and then of course during the Civil War, we had two different capitals. We had Washington D.C. and Richmond, Virginia, different capitals, two different regions. Yeah,
exactly. Well, even Texas had like 3, I believe.
Yeah, Texas was its own country at one time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Texas.
Oh yeah,
I don't remember.
Oh yeah. In fact, this is one of those things because we don't realize how many things have changed so quickly. Sam Houston was alive and was during the at least the beginning of the Civil War. He was actually they kicked him out as governor because he opposed Texas joining the Confederacy. He wanted to remain in America, and he was deposed because of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there you go. Texas join America? When did that happen?
Oh, again, dates are not my thing.
It's 18 something.
Yeah, well,
obviously,
America or Texas didn't exist, or the nation of Texas didn't exist until the 1800s. Hold on, now I gotta know because it was just before the Civil War. Hold on, I cannot believe I can't remember this off the top of my head. Texas joined USA 1845.
Okay. 1845. And did they willingly join, or did America take over?
No, we wanted very much to be a part of the United States.
Okay. What if the Antichrist comes out of Ukraine? Cheese freak ginger snap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Well, again, we need to be looking to the Islamic world. We need to be looking to Turkey because again, his name, the Antichrist name in the Old Testament is the Assyrian. That's the most common name given to him, right? It's so
he's we also need to be called an abomination.
Yeah, I love it. So hold on, real quick. Saw a couple things. I was pulling something up. Yes. So Elaine's making a great point, and this is we only alluded to it. I understand that that we only alluded to, but a lot of people don't talk about this. After Sarah's death, Abraham remarried. He had 11 other sons, right? So that's a big point. We alluded to that fact. So I thank you.
11. He had 6 with Abraham remarried a woman named Keturah, and he had 6 sons with her. So
was it 6?
So the 6 sons with Keturah, the one with Hagar, that's 7, and then with Sarah with Isaac, that's 8. So 8 sons total.
You know what? I'll double check it for Sunday. How's that? I'll go through and count.
I think they're confusing Jacob. They're thinking the 12 sons of Jacob.
Maybe. Again, names and dates are not my thing. I will double check. But yes, the point is
25.
Yeah. Well, we're almost to the end of the hour. I'll double check it for next time.
Yeah. It is.
So again, yeah, it's to that point. To her point, yes. Again, we only sort of kind of alluded to that fact, and it's very possible a lot of people don't know that because it's not taught about in churches, right? They don't really point out. It's like, hey, he had more than just these 2 kids. He had all these other sons.
Yeah, there's so many people who don't realize that.
Oh yeah. Well, most people. Wives.
Yeah, you're right. He had 3 wives.
Well, it's like if you talk about again the giving of the law at Sinai, most people's the version of the story they're going to give you is out of a Cecil B. DeVille film, They're not, or from the cartoon, they're not going to tell you the actual story.
Yeah.
They don't know this story. They know what's in popular media.
And a lot of people think that Moses' Ethiopian wife was Zipporah. And it's like, no, Zipporah was not Ethiopian. He had an Ethiopian wife. Her name was Tharbis. It's a different woman, meaning Moses had more than one wife. Oh, how dare you say Moses had more than one wife? It's like Abraham had more than one wife. Jacob had more than one wife. What's the problem?
Yeah, that was par for the course up until very recently. The idea of having only one spouse or one wife, it's like, even forget coexisting. It's like this was the idea of being married to one person for your entire life. That's a very modern concept, not necessarily just from not from divorce and remarriage, but from death during childbirth, polygamy. I mean, these were common up until very recently. Again, our culture does not match the one from the Bible, so we miss a lot of the context.
Yeah, like in the New Testament, Paul says that if you want to be a church leader, you have to have only one wife. You can't have like two or three. Yeah. But there were people in the church who had two or three or four, and they weren't like kicked out of the church. They just became church leaders. So it was it was kind of common back then.
Well, and again, a lot of the things that people miss on that, it's like, well, why? Well, it's practicality. If you've got 2, 3, 4 wives, your time you need to be spending doing some other things. It really was a lot of it about practicality.
Yeah. And it's
you could argue theological reasons as well, and that's fine. But a lot of Paul's writings are about practicality. I did want to touch one thing before we close out. Elaine had mentioned, that he's not talking about that the word Arab there is not talking about Arabs per se. However, according to Strong's definition, right, it is from a root word, and there may be a point there about shining, and I will double check that. But the word here actually isn't just Arabian; it means mixed, right? It also means steppe dweller, an inhabitant of Arabia. So now it may not necessarily mean. So that word may not necessarily be used the same way we would use it today, but it's there for a reason. It's still important. And the root word is Arab, and it's still about Arabia. So I think that the translation for Isaiah 13 saying that the Arabs will not pitch their tent there is still a valid interpretation. Okay, so Elaine's saying he had 8 sons, but thought he had 2 daughters. Okay, it's cool. Well, you know what? We'll double check. We'll on Sunday we will have this conversation.
I don't know where the 2 daughters is coming from.
Well, he did have daughters. We know that, but again, it's things can get some things get like one mention and then
sometimes they don't get mentioned. Sometimes they just mention sons.
And when we talk about Abraham, again, this goes back to sort of where we started this whole thing off, the ability to have a conversation. We don't really have conversations anymore, and the church is the worst at it. We want what fits on we'll close on this idea. Sorry. We want whatever fits on a bumper sticker. Anything more, we look at church leadership looks at us as the people in the pew saying, well, you don't deserve to know more than that, or we're not going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where it's like, that is not appropriate, right? It's just, we have to have better conversations. We have to trust people with the information, and we have to go into all the information. Oftentimes the church doesn't do that. They want to give you because they believe that's all people can take. Yeah. And I think it's led to so much confusion, so much unnecessary pain and disagreement. Elaine, but that's just my thought on that. Elaine, yes, I have, and it's very clear. The book that is commonly called the Book of Jasher from, I think, 1846, it was the translation, is very clearly, again, my opinion, and I think it's borne out, is a forgery from the Middle Ages out of Spain. However, it's one of those things where I do think that it is based on a lot of Hebraic oral tradition, which is why I will reference it every once in a while, very specifically. But it's not. I don't think it has even. It's clearly from the Middle Ages and from Spain. Like, we know that. To Overbuild's point, he said what I was talking about with the modern day church, it sounds like public school.
Sounds like public school.
Yep. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I like the way he spelled that. It's funny.
Yep.
Sounds like public school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Elaine, I'm gonna. Yeah, we'll close down on this. And thank you. This is the first time Elaine. I think I've seen you in the chat. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined us. But Elaine, this is why we have this channel, right? We're here we don't want to dumb anything down. We believe that we need to have these better conversations. We believe in the entirety of the Bible. We want to explore it in its entirety. And unfortunately, that's something that the modern church doesn't really like. Again, church meaning the modern church system. So
yeah,
right
especially
there.
if you mention anything about the apocryphal books, that's like, that's like a taboo. You ever play that game Taboo?
Oh yeah, and we're going to be doing another video on that in the future.
You said a trigger word, apocrypha. Can't talk about that.
And of course, as we've discussed many times, the conversation around the apocrypha is just entirely filled with lies and misnomers. So
tons of lies, so many lies.
Yeah, so all we want to have is the best argument, is the best conversation. By argument meaning the best conversation. Not but just actually talking about it, understanding it, that kind of thing. Yeah. So again, Elaine, for again, Quasi, I don't know I ever got your name right. I apologize on that. The first time I've seen you all in the chats, and you're very welcome to return. Please, we're all about that conversation. Love having y'all here. And again, to Gene, Lisa, Titan, Cheese Freak, Ginger Snap, Bat Mom, Susan Robertson. I'm about to run out of CJ. I know was in there. Addie Overbay, Tony Clifton, and anyone whose names I'm forgetting, because everyone has been talking. There's been a lot of great conversation. Thank you for hanging out with us today. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long. It was complete. Some of it was planned. The rest of it was not. So, Overbuilt, appreciate you being here too. So again, and for anyone watching in Bayou Flats, thank you. For everyone who's watching on replay, we appreciate y'all. And hopefully moving forward, everything will go back to normal as far as the overall flow of everything. But there will unfortunately be definitely some upcoming Sundays that I will have to miss because of conferences and research outings, things like that. But luckily, hopefully our schedule should go back to normal. And tomorrow we will be doing the Lord's Supper as well. Normally, I know we're a couple of weeks off on that one, but we'll do it again tomorrow. So y'all be good. I appreciate Nathan. Thank you for joining us again. Tell the good people where they can find your channel on YouTube.
Oh yeah, Nathan H83. I could maybe post the link here if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead if you've got it.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to get
it. Gene, you will see me on Thursday, but you will also see me tomorrow morning. So I will be here.
Okay, let me see if this works.
And Elaine, yes, I'm very much into the Paleo Hebrew. That is an important thing for everyone to study. Absolutely. Let's see if Nathan can post his thing there.
Yeah,
this link.
Okay, I'll just paste that in here. There we go. Okay, paste.
There we go.
Okay, so that's it.
All right, so Nathan's got his posted his link in the chat. But again, Nathan will of course return. We're going to be doing some stuff over at Sewer Papers as well with the Apocrypha and Nathan and a whole bunch of things. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now. We are crazy busy, but things are going to be happening. So y'all have a great one. We appreciate all y'all being here, and I'll catch y'all next time around. Bye.